Welcome to Fright Night. For real.
I really think that we're living in a wonderful time for the horror genre. I mean, there are some really good movies that are coming out, and I don't know what it is. I think it has something to do with less and less original content coming out due to like the streaming IP arms race. It just seems like the horror genre is still putting out films that have originality, and if they don't have originality, they have some type of spark or intuitiveness that makes it unique and special. And that could be a whole like topic on its own, a whole video, a whole podcast or whatever. But in saying how wonderful the horror genre is today, there are some like really good horror movies from the 1980s that I think stand the test of time. But they're also like firmly fixed in the 80s, which makes them kind of special. And one of my favorite horror films of the 80s is 1985's Fright Night. And this movie is a delightful mix of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, campy 80s vampire horror with surprisingly delightful performances from the actors, especially two in particular, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The makeup in Fright Night is top notch. I know we're dealing with a different time, but the makeup is amazing, and the scares are fun and effective. And there is a 2011 remake. This version, the 85 version, still is, in my opinion, the superior version. The story's a lot of fun. You have actor William Ragsdale who plays Charlie Brewster, who's your typical horny, especially 80s horny high school student who likes campy horror films. And he has a girlfriend played by Amanda Burse who basically tolerates his clueless boyish actions. And it's not long into the film that Charlie notices that not only has someone moved into the house next door, but that there's some suspicious activity going on. And eventually Charlie comes to believe that his new neighbor, Chris Sarandon's Jerry Dandridge, is a vampire. This film's a delight. I watched it continually in the 80s and early 90s, but admittedly, I've not seen it in at least 20 years. And I revisited it the other night, and I was struck by how well the film holds up and how fun it is. It's freaking wonderful. But I started to ask the question as I was about midway through, like, why am I enjoying this so much? And I think there's several reasons why this is such a delightful film. I think the first is the cast is good, and in areas it's stellar. And I think Chris Sarandon, who plays the vampire Jerry, and Roddy McDowall, who's the wonderful in this. He plays like this down on their luck has-been actor and late night horror TV host. Those two characters are so good, and when one or both of them are on the screen, Fright Night, it becomes almost something else. It elevates sort of above the content, really because of their performances, and it's a joy to watch. The campy feeling of the film, it really works in its favor. Fright Night, it can be silly, and that never detracts from it. It was made to be fun and funny. And I think because the writer-director Tom Holland had that tone in mind, Fright Night holds up. It's great to laugh at it. It's great when it's silly. With that said, there are some really neat things the film does to create suspense and fear. The first is the realization, it's a scene that's really, it's a blast. And we see this kind of idea pop up in The Lost Boys a few years later, but there's this moment where Jerry, the vampire living next door, has been invited into the home by Charlie's mom. The basic vampire like rules is that a vampire can't come into your home unless he's invited or she is invited. It's like a green light that the vampire can come on in and bite you in the neck. So we see the same thing in 1987's The Lost Boys.
Well, you're the man of the house, and I'm not coming in until you invite me.
You're invited.
Thanks very much.
the suspense generated because Charlie knows his time is running out, like that Jerry is going to be coming. That's really a lot of fun. And I loved that, like that suspense tension in the film. It was a blast. There are several moments like that, but there's also some really wonderful, and I think I would be remiss if I don't mention this. The makeup and creature effects are great. And we live in this different age of filmmaking, so it's easy to watch a film from this time period and sort of be dismissive. But when you look at what they're doing practically, it's kind of amazing. And I think the work done in Fright Night, it's effective. It really adds to the film. And one standout moment is when Peter, played by Roddy McDowall, Peter faces off against Evil, who's Charlie's friend. And the makeup is stellar. And it was surprising when they have this little showdown. It adds this, like, obviously a sense of fear, but ultimately sadness to the scene. And that's really played off by, like, the makeup effects. It's really top-notch stuff. But, you know, the film is funny, and sometimes purposefully so, and sometimes not. Case in point, the club scene. I don't know if we would classify Jerry as being cool, but then again, when we think about the 80s, hey, it was glorious, wasn't it? But truly, there are some funny moments, and a lot of humor is really rooted in the chemistry the cast has with each other. Sometimes movies just hit all the right notes, and Fright Night hits the bullseye when it comes to horror comedy, and it holds up. It's influential. I mean, I think The Lost Boys has some ideas that really, either intentionally or it was just in the ether, pulls from Fright Night. And I love The Lost Boys. The movie it's funny, it's goofy, it's well acted, it's suspenseful, and for some viewers, it's even scary. So if you want to have time, and you want to go back and revisit something from the 80s, Fright Night, hey, it's an excellent choice.